Hello everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. We're knocking out another tournament report. I think at this point you know the drill. You kind of know the form this is going to take. I'm Russell or Rusty with $30 budget vintage. I think you know that by now, but if you don't, and this is your first time watching, welcome. This channel is all about $30 budget vintage, so vintage, banned and restricted list, but your total deck has to be sub $30. Couple housekeeping items, which basically means upcoming tournaments. Today is March 10th. Tomorrow, March 11th, is Saturday. We're also doing our first event at Mavericks. It's going to be at 1 p.m. It'll be $10 entry, and it's going to be a Win-A-Buy event for our Win-A-Taiga event. The winner of that tournament, the Win-A-Buy tomorrow, will receive a round 1 buy for our Win-A-Taiga event, which will also be at Mavericks. It'll be on March 25th. That'll be $20 entry. First place will get a Taiga revised. Is that the version? It's white border. I think it's the less good version. I could be wrong on the actual version. I'm stupid, so I don't know my early card names or my early card versions. Regardless, it'll be a Win-A-Taiga, $20 entry. Taiga to first, and then store credit payout below that. We're kind of new to working with Mavericks, so I don't know the exact price structure it'll be. It should be really similar to what we were intending it to be a while ago, which I guess it'll depend on the number of entrants at this point, but it should be pretty good. Note that both those tournaments are no proxy, unfortunately. Mavericks does have a really deep card inventory, and they do take deck list submissions, like for pulling cards, through their Facebook. So go ahead and send them a message on there. They've got a Google form they'll link you to, and you should be able to pick up most of what you need. If not, post in the Discord, and we'll work together to try and figure it out. I know I'm lending Joe a couple of cards, so I'm sure other people would be happy to. Last bit of housekeeping and last tournament, this upcoming Monday, which I think is I guess I'll look. I think it's March 13th. Let's see if I'm right. Do I know how days work? Boom, March 13th. We're going to be doing our first online tournament. It's going to be hosted through the Discord, which if you're not in already, there will be a link in the whatever. Join the Discord. Tournament's free. It's going to be firing off at 6:30 p.m. Where am I? Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to ask that everyone be ready at around 6:15 for a players meeting, where basically I try to tell you what's going to happen. It'll be played over spell table. I've never done that before. And I've got a Google form where you can submit your deck list as well as a screenshot of your spell table screen. I just want to make sure that nobody's looks bad. And by bad, I mean unusable. I don't care if it looks bad, but if your opponent's not going to be able to see what's going on, then we're going to have to adjust it. And me and Everett can give you some tips on how to do that. I just set up my own spell table setup. It's right over here. You can't see. It's out of shot. But it was super easy. I bought like a $16 ARM thing and on Amazon, and it fixed all my problems. So really excited for that. Moving on into the actual tournament report. We'll talk really quickly about what I played, and then we'll talk about what the players who did well played, which is not me. I'm not one of the players who did well. But we're moving in the right direction. I feel like I've been playing a lot of really stupid, bad decks lately. I get distracted by novelty, and then I end up showing up with these decks I've never played that are like untuned, yada, yada, yada. And honestly, I was kind of not having a fun time with it. I really wasn't enjoying it or doing well. So I think I found something I'm going to sink my teeth into. I really like the feel of this, and it's high tide, as you can see. This list is basically a modification of the list that Everett and Doug workshopped together. It's the Turbo Mind's Desire version, as we call it, or as some people call it. For those who don't know, High Tide is a combo deck based around playing basic islands and High Tide, then generating a bunch of mana through Frantic Search and other untap effects. Then you win the game with either a storm spell like Brain Freeze if you're rich, or if you're not rich, you use Blue Sun Zenith like the common man. There's previous, I think the last tournament report, we talked about how there were 100 High Tide decks, and I went into them in depth. I'm just going to talk about a couple differences between mine and Everett's list. I'm trying a couple different things out. The biggest one is that I cut the Brain Freeze, and I'm trying to win the game with Blue Sun Zenith instead. The reason is budget. It's about $3.30 more for a Brain Freeze, and I wanted to allocate that money a little bit differently. I'm putting that money basically straight into 2 Mystic Sanctuaries and 2 Defense Grids in the board. I felt really good about the Mystic Sanctuaries. They let me do some cool stuff, like turn 4 I was playing, and I went um, tap Island, High Tide, play Mystic Sanctuary, put High Tide on top, Frantic Search, draw the High Tide, cast the High Tide with a floating mana, and then, I've got double High Tide active, and then I can like make a pretty crazy amount of mana because I've got 2 High Tides going so early. And I think that's actually really important because my concern with the Blue Sun Zenith as a win condition over Brain Freeze is that Brain Freeze, you really just need a decently high storm count, like, I don't know, 18 or 20 or whatever, which isn't particularly hard to do, and you also don't have to dump 100 mana into it. Blue Sun Zenith, on average, you're going to have to spend, I don't know, let's call it 53 mana to get your opponent dead, which is a pretty big amount of mana. I was a little concerned that it was going to be difficult to actually generate that much mana, and I think that there are cases where it could be, but I never felt like I wasn't able to do that when I was able to storm off. Realistically, once you do get to the point where you're storming off and your opponent's F6'd, the world is your oyster. You can generate a pretty good amount of mana. There was a while where I was goldfishing, and I wanted to find out if I could Blue Sun Zenith with enough mana to potentially remand it back to my hand in the face of a single counterspell, and then cast another Blue Sun Zenith for lethal, which I was considering that to be like 53 mana for the first Blue Sun Zenith, 2 mana for the remand, and then 53 more, so like 108 mana. And that feels doable. There were games where I ended up under like 4 High Tide effects, so each mountain was 5, and then I would turn about myself, untap 4 islands, make 20 mana, that kind of thing. So it was doable. Defense grids are the other biggest change. I don't know that those are super important. I didn't play against Control, and I think that Control might be a decent matchup anyway. You'd think it's hard because of counterspells and spell pierces and stuff, but their clock is so slow that I feel like I would have time to put like 7 or 8 islands into play, and at that point I almost don't need to resolve a High Tide. I just need to like set up a Mind's Desire turn, and ideally if I can engineer a Mind's Desire for 6 or whatever, it should crush them, hopefully. You also get to turnabout on the end step, so I might side these defense grids out. As a fun treat to anyone who actually watches these videos when they come out, I am going to be playing High Tide at the Win-A-Taiga on Saturday, so go ahead and load up your damping spheres to put me in my place. I'll go over my matches really quick because they're a little bit interesting. I might actually title the video using some clickbait about the first one. Round 1, I played against Kyle on Enchantress, which is a kind of interesting matchup, sort of. Game 1, he turned 2 or 3 Crucifix's Insight and revealed a Solitary Confinement. I think it was his turn 2. So I can't beat Solitary Confinement in the main board because my only way to win is Blue Sun Zenith, and it gives Shroud to the player. So I attempted an early. I attempted to go off early on turn 3, I think, because I knew it was revealed, and I knew if he slammed Solitary Confinement, I was dead. I kind of fizzled on that turn, and then he didn't play the Solitary Confinement. We talked about it. He just kind of forgot about the Shroud, which is reasonable. It's a weird card. It's got a ton of text and a lot of corner cases. Then I kind of tried to go off again on turn 4, but my resources were depleted, and then he played the Solitary Confinement, and I lost. I guess I could have hoped he didn't play the Solitary Confinement, but it felt like it was better to try to go off certainly on turn 3. Then we went to the next game, game 2, and I brought in Fascination. I think Fascination might be the best secondary win condition for High Tide. Me and Everett looked at a bunch of other stuff, up to and including Goblin Cannon, Goblin Rocket. I don't remember which one it is. It's like a 2-mana artifact. You pay 2, and you put an ability on the stack that says deal 1 damage to any target, and as part of the resolution of the ability, it sacrifices the artifact. You can put like 100 activations on the stack, and it won't sack until you resolve the first one. It's a way to beat like Elixir of Immortality, but it doesn't beat Hexproof. So Fascination lets us just mill both players' libraries and then pass the turn to our opponent, and they try to draw a card on their upkeep and they die. So game 2, he didn't really have much for me. I think he got under a Solitary Confinement, then I just Fascinationed us out. Game 3 was interesting because he resolved. I've totally forgot about this. I think it was actually main board. He resolved an Elixir of Immortality, which says, it's an artifact. 1 tap, sack it, shuffle your graveyard into your library. Also gain some life. So he played that card, I think, on his turn 2. And I went to my turn 3, and I cast a Solve the Equation to look in my deck and see if I could beat Elixir of Immortality. I sideboarded out my Blue Sun Zenith because I assumed a Solitary Confinement was going to get put into play, so it wasn't going to win, and I was going to win through Fascination. And I didn't bring in my Echoing Truths because I assumed that any Solitary Confinement or Gideon's Intervention effects would be protected by a Sterling Grove. So I didn't actually have a way to beat. I didn't have a way to beat the Elixir of Immortality because my plan would be to mill us both out with Fascination, then pass the turn to him, and as long as he had a mana up, he could crack Elixir on his upkeep, shuffle his stuff in, draw a card for the turn, then pass back to me, and I would die because I'm milled out. What someone pointed out after... Okay, so let me continue on this tangent for a little bit. So I felt like I couldn't beat it, so I used a forbidden technique. And I think I actually said, I think this is a Thanos quote. I know what I have to do, but I'm not sure I have the strength to do it. Because we were in game 3 with about 15 minutes left, and I realized that my out to onboard Elixir of Immortality with the way I sideboarded was to use Fascination to have each player draw at least their library plus 1 card. Which would make both players draw from an empty library simultaneously. It's at the same time because you're in the resolution of one spell. You can't lose the game during the resolution of a spell. So as long as we both deck out during the same, like at the same state-based action check after Fascination resolves, it actually puts game 3 into a draw. And I was telling my roommate about this. I said, yeah, I got a draw in game 4. I don't know if everyone knows this, but a match in Magic the Gathering isn't a best of 3. It's actually a first to 2. Which means that if you do have a game come to a draw through like an uninterruptible loop, I think, which is kind of a weird situation, or more frequently, both players dying simultaneously to something like a Fascination, or more commonly, I would say like a Hurricane or Roiling Earthquake effect, or like Crypt Rats for X equals infinity in a game of EDH or something. Well, I guess EDH doesn't matter because we're talking about tournament play. But in the event that there is a draw, you have to play a game 4 because... it's not a best of 3, it's a first to 2. Additionally, that means that although it's not common, if both players do, for example, mull to 5, I believe you can technically choose to draw that game and go to a game 4, effectively doing what some people refer to as a gentleman's mulligan, like the idea that if both players go to 5, instead of having both players go to 5, you could both go to 7. I don't really recommend doing that because I think that based on the context of the decks, one player would be making a mistake to do a gentleman's mulligan in that way, right? One deck's going to operate better on lower resources. A judge in chat can tell me if there's anything illegal about that, but I think technically you're allowed to suggest it and do it. Anyway, so I didn't win game 3. I drew us out in game 3. And then we had a minute and a half left for game 4, so I went ahead and just suggested that we draw because we were holding up the tournament, and I found it unlikely I would even be able to go through the motions. Actually, I probably could have won in turns, but I kind of wanted to just move on, and I thought it was a funny story. Anyway, I gotta be honest, I'm going to count that as a moral victory for High Tide, because I think I was mega favored going into game 4. So I ended up finishing it out 1-2-1. So I played against Enchantress, and we took the draw. Round 2, I played against Spencer on Pirates. I'm just making sure I have names right. Yep, Spencer on Pirates. I was playing Red Black Pirates. Pretty cool list. I might show it off at the end of the video, depending on how long this goes. It's a tribal deck. It attacks. Didn't have a ton of interaction for me, except a Kitesail Freebooter, and the clock wasn't quite fast enough, so I took that one down. And then... Round 3 was against Riley on Mono Blue Dredge, and I got crushed. A fast clock plus Cabal Therapy was hard for me in Game 1. Game 2, I misplayed. I didn't play my turn 1 Soul Guide Lantern. I wanted to sandbag it to get a ETB trigger to like maybe catch a Dredger. That was a mistake. I didn't play it on turn 1 or turn 2 because I'm stupid. And then Riley did Dredge stuff, and then there were a bunch of creatures in play. And I died. But I think Mono Blue Dredge is sick, by the way. We'll go to it. Then round 4, I played against Rakdos Skelementals. We'll see that list at the end, actually. It was Alan. I think the deck's super cool. Interesting thing was that since there's a lot of ball lightnings in that list, like lightning skelementals and stuff, I was able to use like turnabouts to tap down the creatures and kind of deny the attack. So then the skelementals had to sacrifice themselves. We went to what I considered a pretty close 3-game match. I lost the third game. I had a little bit of trouble finding a High Tide. I had a lot of lands in play, but I just couldn't find the High Tide. And then eventually there were 2 Thunderkin Awakeners on board, and I only had 1 Snap, and then it was a problem. It was really fun, though. I gotta say, I think I was telling some people, High Tide feels like a way better fit for me than some of the other stuff I've been playing. It was kind of complicated, and I definitely need more work. I need to put in some more time goldfishing to learn my lines better, and I also need to play more interactive games to figure out how to navigate opponents better. But it feels like something I really want to sink my teeth into, so yeah, expect to see me on High Tide more. Sorry, everybody, bring your damping spheres. All right, so jumping into what you guys actually care about, this is actually the deck techs, or the talking about the top 8. I'm gonna go through it and read some names really quick because I got to pull it up in another tab. So first place we got Preston on Oops All Spells. Quick sidebar about Preston. I was actually just having this conversation with one of my buddies. I think it was Chris or someone. He's been 4-0ing a lot, and he's been playing a different deck every week, I think, and they're all decks that he's put together himself. We were talking about his deck choices. And I think I said exactly. So is Preston just cracked or what? Like, I think Preston's just crazy. And after talking to some people and talking to Preston himself, yeah, I think Preston's just very good at Magic. Sounds like he plays a lot of Pioneer and has like really good technical play and also deck building skills, which is something I've learned I don't have. Building decks is really hard. And truthfully, you don't have to build constructed decks very much. Like in Modern, a lot of the time you're selecting a deck and then maybe modifying it for your metagame. In this, you're really brewing decks all your own. So I just wanted to give Preston a quick shout out because, I mean, going 4-0 multiple weeks in a row with decks of your own creation is really, really cool and really healthy for the format, and it gives me good content. So thank you, Preston. Continuing on, second place, Kyle on Enchantress. That deck's crazy. He hasn't played it in a little while, so I think some sideboard stuff got removed, and he did well with it. Third place, Andrew on Affinity. We'll look at that. He's been playing Affinity for a while. It's the all artifact land list. Fourth place is my roommate, Andrew. He played a silly Grixis control deck. I'm excited to look at it. Fifth place, Will on Martyr proc, as always. Good job, Will. Sixth place, Chris on Mono Black Rack. Shout out to Will and Chris as well. I see them in the top 8 a lot. Seventh place, Luis playing Is It Delver. We love to see some Delver. And eighth place, Riley on Mono Blue Dredge, which I think is crazy. I think Dredge is actually really well positioned right now. I've heard some people say things like, I think I might take my Tormod's Crypts out of my sideboard this week. So good job, Riley, showing us that we still need Grave Hate. So let's check out these deck lists. This is Oops All Spells. The way this deck works, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, it's not so different from Cephalid Breakfast in that you want to get all of your library into your graveyard, and then you want to put a Laboratory Maniac into play, and then you want to draw a card and win the game. The way we're going to put Labman into play is using Dread Return. We're going to cast the flashback of it, and we are going to sacrifice Narcomoebas in order to pay for that, and we're going to reanimate Angel of Glory's Rise, which will, we don't care about the zombies part, it'll reanimate our Labman and our Azami Lady of Scrolls. At this point, we have no cards in our library. We have an untapped Labman and an untapped Azami. And then, depending on what the opponent has up, we're probably just going to tap one of them to attempt to draw a card and win the game. Notably, because you have... Oh, you actually also have Undercity and Form... Oh, these aren't wizards. We need wizards. Yeah, so notably we only have the 2 wizards, so you can always beat one piece of removal, because if you Labman, you would tap Azami to draw a card, they would use a removal spell on Labman, and then you could tap Labman to draw a second card and like beat them on the stack, which is good to know. I think that if your opponent does hold up like 2 pieces of removal, like let's say 2... Defiles, for example, I think that can actually beat you. There's probably a way around it. You just have to get a little bit tricky, maybe involving Memory's Journey on your upkeep to get your Labman back or something. That sounds right. But the reason it's called Oops All Spells is because it plays no lands. It plays no lands because the way we want to get our deck milled is with Balustrade, Spy, or Undercity Informer. Either of these cards, when powered out, will allow us to mill our whole library because we have no lands in our deck. Right? We have these MDFCs, these flip lands, which produce mana. We're going to play tap lands on turn 1 a lot of the time. But they don't count as lands because they aren't lands, right? It's a sorcery. So that's kind of the restriction. You have to play these MDFCs, but the upside is that it lets you mill your deck really easily. I think that Lotleth Giant is a sideboard plan that allows you to beat removal because you have 32 creatures in your deck. You can reanimate a Lotleth Giant, which will kill most people. You guys know we've talked about this with Cephalid Breakfast. The deck's a little bit soft to Graveyard Hate, but it looks like this is a good week for it. But it is blazing fast and doesn't care about most typical types of interaction. So very much like Cephalid Breakfast, it's a nice turbo combo deck that can catch unexpected opponents unawares and win the game. So excellent choice, good deck. Next, we have Enchantress. I don't think a ton has changed about this. I will say, look, 2 mainboard Elixir of Immortalities. I like the 4 Obstinate Baloth on the sideboard. We've been seeing an uptick of rack decks lately. There were 2 this week, and I think there were a couple last week. Enchantress is cool. Very hard to win through a solitary confinement for a lot of decks, and buying time with like Elephant Grass and things is reasonable. I like the Crucifix's Insight. That's not something me or Everett ever tried in our lists, but it always looks good when Kyle casts it, and Kyle and I play on table 12 almost every week, usually in round 1 or 2. So I'm familiar with Crucifix's Insight here. Good deck, nice to see it around. I think I was telling Doug on the way home, it does weird things to the format having things like Enchantress around, just because decks have to have a plan for solitary confinement, you know? It's really interesting what it does, and I think it's cool, but it definitely does affect deck construction. Next deck, Affinity. I'm not sure if there's anything that we need to talk about here. We've seen this before. Like I said, all artifact lands, which is cool. Forging the Anchor, Thoughtcast, and Thought Monitor are all good. Cranial Plating is good. The deck is good. Looks like some counter spells and some bounce spells on the side. I actually think this deck can beat Energy Flux a decent amount of the time. So maybe Affinity is just insane still if Energy Flux doesn't truly beat it. Maybe I should be playing Affinity. Next. Alright, so this is Andrew's deck. It's crazy. Let's talk for a minute about what's going on here. First off, we're playing the Indestructible Artifact lands, and we're playing Cleansing Wildfires. When you combine this with an indestructible land that you control, it is red Rampant Growth plus draw a card. Because you're going to attempt to destroy your indestructible land. It's not going to work, but unlike a Terrastodon style ability, it doesn't say if you destroyed a land this way, then search for a basic. It just says search for a basic. So you attempt to destroy the land, you don't succeed at destroying the land, but you get the basic land and draw a card anyway. So it's ramp. So it's a 3-color control deck built around artifact lands, Cleansing Wildfire, and then a couple of Tezzerets. Yeah, I'm not going to read the text on these. The important thing is that this Tezzeret makes your artifacts 5/5s sometimes, probably. Alright, I'll try a little bit harder. Nope, I can't change the version. You're just going to have to look it up on your own. Trust me when I say that one of the modes, the -1, makes an artifact into a 5/5. There's some Jaces and a Dihada, which is cool. Then additionally, we're controlling the board with some Languishes. A couple other tricks this deck has. Rise and Shine, if you overload it, it makes all of your artifact lands into 4/4s that are indestructible. That'll close out a game. And additionally, Boom Bust is really strong when you don't destroy your lands. So the first mode, Boom, is just a 2-mana land destruction spell when you target your own land. And Jokel Hops doesn't destroy your own lands. It also doesn't destroy your planeswalkers. So it's pretty good. Then there's a nice counterspell, Lose Focus, Erebos' Intervention. Just good interaction. Sideboard, I know he was pretty ready to beat me on High Tide with his Spell Pierces, Counterspells, Unmoored Ego, etc. I think that's smart. I'll be honest, this deck is wild and super cool, and it's pretty untuned. I think this... Andrew hasn't really played this very much. I know it's been an idea he's had for a while, but this was a relatively untuned and untested version, and it put up a 3-1, which I think is really encouraging, and I really like to see kind of weird off-the-wall stuff like this. My first question would be, I wonder if you can go up in Boom Bust, because it's just 2 mana Stone Rain, right? That's good. He was talking about wanting to cut the Rise and Shines because 4/4s don't play very well with Languish, but then I think he slept on it, and he also said he can't cut the Rise and Shines because he needs them to win the game. One Tezzeret's not enough. I think that's a fair point. So we'll see how he develops that, but overall, cool deck. If you don't think that this deck is cool, and you're not excited to see it do well, this might not be the format for you, because I think it's really cool that decks like this can be played here. Next deck. Alright, so this is Martyr Proc. We've looked at it. Let's just check on any changes. Notably, Kami of False Hope is creeping up ever so slowly. Tragic Poet still in the main. That makes sense. 2 Paladin classes. It might have been 1 last time I did a deck tech on this. I think mainly it's to play around counter magic, and it also just helps close out the game. Sideboard, it looks like 3 Damping Spheres. Got to be prepared for Storm. Blossoming Calm sort of helps as well. I really like the Fragmentizes. I don't think those are particularly new, but I think Fragmentize is just really, really powerful. I think that Will had just cut the Nova Cleric, which is a 1-drop that can sacrifice itself. I think tap, sacrifice, blow up all enchantments. We'll see if that comes back in for some of the big tournaments. I love the Sanctifier in Vex. And I think there was some conversation. Will thought maybe he might go to 2 Relic Vials. I think he lost his finals match against Enchantress because... so the reason Relic Vials here is because it's an out to Solitary Confinement. Because it's non-targeted and it's loss of life. So Will was in a game state where his way to beat a Solitary Confinement... I think Will had Kami Lock, so he didn't care about Enchantress's threats, right? You don't have to care about the Paradox Zone creatures if you have the Kami of False Hope lock. Will's plan to win was to have 4 active Abiding Graces, which he did have at the end of the game, he told me, and Relic Vial in play, and then sacrifice 4, Kami of False Hopes every turn to drain out his Enchantress opponent for 4. The problem with that was that his Relic Vial was the 4th card from the bottom of his deck. So just like shuffle variants lost the game, I think. Like if it had been 5 cards higher, it sounds like Will was guaranteed to win. Kind of just unfortunate. So he mentioned maybe swapping the Chalice of Life out to another Relic Vial. We'll see what he does with that. But yeah, that's how it goes sometimes. Still love this deck. Loyal Sentry went up to 3. I think it was 2 last time. And I know I've said this before, but I really like seeing the amount of love that Will puts into tuning this deck. I really respect that. Next deck. Alright, this is Chris. He's playing the Rack. This is a deck he's been working on a while too, and I think it's awesome. You just create a small game, right? You make your opponent discard all their cards with Blackmails and Smallpoxes and Hymns, and then you try to win the game with Shrieking Afflictions, the Rack. There's another Spirit. I don't remember if he was playing it last time. And then you also have some Mishra's Factories to attack. Davriel's also close out the game. I love this deck. I think it's really good. I think it's hard to metagame against. I think it's very hard to metagame against. So if we do see an uptick in this, I don't know what we do. Maybe play Blossoming Calms. Maybe play Squadron Hawks. I don't know. This is Delver. Let's see what Luis is up to. Looks like we're on 2 True Names. That makes sense. We're not on any of the 2-drop that's banned. The one that flashes things back. What's it called? Flashes back a spell equal to its power. You know the one I'm talking about. It's banned in Legacy. We're not playing that. We are on the Foragers, which is cool. We are on Cruise No Dig. And we're not playing any copies of Portent to set up our Delvers. We're just relying on Preordain and our massive instant count, it looks like. We also have 1 Brainstorm, of course. 19 lands. 8 red sources makes sense to me. It's just Young Peasy and Bolt. And sideboard cards. Yeah. Daze, Lose Focus, Counterspell. How bad can it ever be, right? Awesome. Alright, so this is Mono Blue Dredge. I think that this is the first time Riley has sleeved up Mono Blue Dredge in a tournament. I think Riley was playing red for a while. And I think part of this came from discussion with Hadel in the Discord about the different dredge lists. But basically, here we're powering our dredgers with Careful Study, and we don't have Faithless Looting or Faithless Salvaging, right? So we have Careful Study, we have Breakthrough, which is insane. If you break through for 1 mana, you draw 4 cards, then you pitch your hand, which is good. If you break through for 2 mana, you do the same thing, except you get to keep 1, like Careful Study or something. Tolarian Winds also rips a lot of cards. Cool thing about Tolarian Winds, you discard first and then you draw. So if you have, let's say you have a 5-card hand, one of them is Tolarian Winds, so you cast it, you're going to discard 4 cards and then draw 4 cards. If you have some dredgers in your hand, like let's say a Grave Troll, you discard it as part of Tolarian Winds, and then you get to dredge 6. So I think Tolarian Winds is crazy. My first question, and I'm not a dredger, I don't know very much about playing or building the deck. I definitely trust Riley's judgment. My only question would be, why not 4 Tolarian Winds? My guess is because it costs 2 mana instead of 1 mana, and we're playing 15 lands. That's my guess. Sideboard Spell Pierces. Like I said, this deck beat me up bad. I did misplay, but it beat me up bad because it's fast, it's got Spell Pierces, and along with the Bridge from Below, there's like Narcomoebas and Cabal Therapies. So it's a pretty fast clock, and also once some dredging happens, the dredge player gets to therapy the High Tide player, me, and take my High Tides and stuff out of my hand. I think this deck's very powerful. Definitely want to pack some Graveyard Hate going forward if this deck's going to be around. I like the one of Hogak. I think that's cool. That's a good deck. And that does it for a top 8. Just a reminder, this is what I played. I'll probably play something very similar tomorrow. A couple other decks I wanted to shout out. I know this video is getting kind of long, so thanks for bearing with me. I'm going to shout out, I don't know if I've showed this before. This is Joe's Chandra Tribal deck. I'm going to be honest, guys. I think this deck's really good. I think it's consistently gone at least even. I think it's been even to positive every week he's played it. So you're playing a whopping 13 Chandras. You're playing Simian Spirit Guide to power them out, as well as Mind Stones, I believe. You're playing Chandra's Regulator, which is a legendary artifact, but it's very powerful. It's going to let you double up your activated abilities, and it's going to loot you and give you some card advantage. I think he just started trying Heart of Kiran. Card's good with Planeswalkers. And then Pyroclasm, Lightning Bolts, and Bone Crushers to beat up on creature decks. You also have Interplanar Beacons, which generate a little bit of additional life, which I think gives you like favorable matchups to some aggressive decks. Looks like we're really on Damping Sphere for our combo matchups. Red Elemental Blast. I will say, I talked to Joe, and we think that Spell Pierce matchups are really hard for Chandra Tribal. We were hanging out at Woodburn on Tuesday, and I was playing my Blue-Red Tolarian Terror deck, and that matchup felt impossible for him, because I have a bunch of Spell Pierces and counterspells, and then my threats are too big for Lightning Bolts and Chandra down ticks, and they also have Ward. So, like, literally there couldn't be a worse matchup, but we think that Spell Pierces and blue decks, especially Delver style things, are really hard for this deck. So if anybody has any suggestions, like if anyone's done some deep Scryfall searches to figure out what anti-blue red cards there are that aren't Red Elemental Blast, let us know. I think Joe right now is going to do a little bit of looking, but he might just decide to lose to Delver and not even play the blasts in the sideboard. We'll see what he ends up doing. But if anyone's got any slam dunk card suggestions, go ahead and drop them in the comments. I will say, I love that 4 Torch of Defiance is $11. That's crazy. I don't know why this card doesn't see play. I mean, $11 is a lot, right? But at the same time, this is a very powerful card. It's cool to see it see play. And that's really all I got on that one. Next deck to shout out. What is this? Oh yeah, this is the Skelemental deck that Alan played. It's built around Lightning Skelemental, basically getting flashbacked by Thunderkin Awakener. You can read that. Or Unearth. You have Flamekin Harbinger to tutor it to the top, which also gets Thunderkin Awakener. One thing that I thought was really cool, he managed to fit 2 Skull Clamps in the deck, which did take most of the sideboard budget. I'm curious to hear about the choice to do Skull Clamps over 4 Flamekin Harbingers. I built a version of this deck a while ago that was a lot less in on the additional Ball Lightnings, and I wanted 4 Flamekin Harbingers, but I trust Alan's judgment. He's a good deck builder. The sideboard is very funny. It's 3 Incandescent Soulstokes. I don't know when that comes in. I'm suspecting Control because of the activated ability, but maybe not because you still have to resolve a 3-mana spell. There's also the Anthem, which is going to make our ball lightnings do more damage. Maybe they just come in against removal light decks. Like, if I'm playing High Tide, he probably wants to cut the bolts and maybe the Perforce's interventions. So maybe in like combo matchups where there are no opposing creatures, you just bring in 3 additional elementals because your removal spells aren't that good. I don't know. Alan, let me know what your thought process is on that. I'd be interested to hear it. Again, not a criticism. I'm just curious. I like this deck. I would love to see it be a mainstay. I gotta say, hitting your opponent with a Lightning Skelemental multiple turns in a row feels insanely fun. And again, I'm just gonna shout out the red-black mana base for being cheap. Very, very cheap. But that's what I got for tournament reports. I'm going to try to keep some more coming. Like I said, we have a Win-A-Buy tomorrow, Saturday, March 11th at Mavericks at 1 p.m. Reminder, it's no Proxies, but they sell cards there, so you can get the cards you need probably. I hope I see a lot of people out there. We only announced the date a week ago, so I'll be honest, I'm a little bit nervous. I think it might end up being like a 7-person tournament, but I don't know. Maybe I'll be surprised. And then I'm hoping we have a good turnout for March 25th, which is the Win-A-Taiga. And I hope some people play the Spell Table tournament on Monday. It's just a little one. If we get more than 8 people, I'll go ahead and buy the winner a $30 deck of their choosing, shipped straight from TCG Player to their house, or P.O. Box if you don't want to give me your address. I don't care. But I just want to kind of do it as a proof of concept. It really wouldn't be a bad thing if it's a 4-person tournament because I just want to figure out how running tournaments works. Also, I don't currently know what site or software I'm going to use to manage the tournament brackets. In the Peasant Cube drafts that I do with Scuffle, we have used Matcherino in the past. I don't really know if it's good. He handles all of the logistics. I'm just kind of there, and I talk a lot. If anyone has any suggestions, like I know I could use Companion, I could manually enter stuff. I don't want to do that. I want something that's going to handle all the pairings for me, collect reports of who won from players as they go, and do breakers and stuff. So if anyone's got suggestions, let me know. I'm going to do a little research today and tomorrow and have something for Monday, but that's it. That's all I got, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Continue to spread the good word of this format. It's still a lot of fun. We just fired this last event with 24 people, which is kind of down from our all-time highs of like 32. But you also got to think it's week 6 of an 8-week league, and most people are already out of prize contention, so we're not doing any entry fee on a given night, and you're getting paid out at the end if you top 8, I think, or top 4. So for most players, we're just there for the love of the game, and I think 24 people for that is amazing. Again, shout out to Monster Games and Simon especially for helping make that happen. Simon's been gathering these deck lists and posting them every week immediately, which is insanely helpful and impressive. If you guys feel like commenting, thank you, Simon, down below. I think he'd appreciate it because I know I appreciate his efforts. So, all right, that's all I got. I'm signing off. Thanks, guys.